Another feeling that might be considered addictive would be the phobias, the fears. We can get controlled by our fear. A lot of fear we attach to other things. Usually, if we're phobic, the things that we've attached our fear to are not really what we're afraid of. They're doing a lot of really excellent work with phobias, having people face the phobia, having people do deep relaxation, all that stuff. But I'm convinced that there's a missing ingredient, and that is what the phobia is really about. And that's a systems thing. I think kids get scared in systems. They get scared of one of like maybe 4 or 5 things, and those 4 or 5 things are very simple. Is mom or dad going to hurt each other? Are mom and dad going to leave me or hurt me? That's what kids get scared of. And so who do you talk to about that? Well, you don't. So kids normally invent the boogeyman, they invent being afraid of the dark, and they get the fear kind of taken care of. But I believe that if we have this wellspring of fear that hasn't been taken care of, it's going to attach to things like flying, loss of control, our feet leaving the ground, high places, water, although sometimes that's about being thrown in a pool when you're 3 to learn how to swim on the deep end. It might attach itself to storms or driving on freeways, or whatever it is. And incidentally, phobias are a part of codependency in the acute and chronic stages, I think, too. Codependents get more fears as they go along. But I still believe it goes back primarily to childhood fears that we haven't resolved, that we haven't been able to feel. The feeling is still controlling us, and it just attaches somewhere that makes more sense than is mom going to leave dad, at least to us at this age. Ruminating and worrying and being scared and high anxiety states all the time, that can be addictive too and has a lot to do with fear. Guilt. Guilt is also possible. It's possible to be addicted to guilt. In fact, guilt is that veneer of codependency. You have to have a veneer of guilt to be a good codependent. See, guilt is a denial of your uniqueness. And you always have to react to what other people are and be more like them. And some of the most dysfunctional families that I work with are families where they have this guilt base, but it's disguised as love. And sometimes it's Saint Mom and Dad that are running the family. I don't know if any of you had Saint Mom and Dad. But Saint Mom and Dad are so wonderful that of course you have to be wonderful like Saint Mom and Dad, and you have to become who they are, or you have to become what they want you to be. And that is not love. You love a person by looking at them and saying, I love you and I'm going to do all I can to help you become the person that you were meant to be. But when I make you like me, well, first of all, I'm relegating you to second best. I think Buscaglia said that once or something. And because I'm the best me there's ever going to be, so if I make you like me, you're going to be second. That's the first thing. But the thing is that if we're not ourselves, we're set up to be addicts. We're lost. We don't have an identity. If we're trying to be someone else out of that guilt, we're set up to be codependents and get enmeshed in other people's reality, and that's what the process is. And that's sometimes the hardest family system to work on, because who wants to get mad at Saint Mom and Dad? And how do you get mad at Saint Mom and Dad? How do you break off? How do you become yourself? It's a real close system. Guilt, shame. Shame is also addictive. Therapist once told me that she thought I was probably addicted to defensiveness. I was being a little defensive in the session. And not too, mind you. What, me defensive? I was not. Who said that? And what I realized, when I learned about shame was that it was really my shame that I was addicted to. And that my shame was controlling my life. It was controlling what I would allow or let people see about me. I felt so bad about myself that I never wanted them to see that. I didn't want to see it, so it was affecting how much of me I could look at. My life was revolving around my very shame. So that can be addiction too. So we can get addicted to a lot of different things. Well, maybe we should look at this. Yes, question.
Does procrastination come in those feelings?
You really took me literally when I said we'll talk about that later, right? Does procrastination come with a feeling? No, procrastination, I like that. It's just one of those things that we do to stay on the edge sometimes. You ever notice that if you procrastinate leaving, and you got to get there on time, you know how exciting it is to drive and thinking, now I got 1 minute? If you don't do your taxes for 6 years, you ever notice how exciting it is to wonder if you're ever going to get the call? It's living on the edge again. And some of it is I think some of procrastination is passive-aggressive behavior too. Always being late, always putting things off, and then everybody around you goes crazy, and you go, you drove them crazy. Of course, you're getting crazy too, but there's other things like always having to list everything, taking notes in lectures, right? Having to get every word. No, I'm just kidding. You get addicted to humor. We just scratched the surface, really. There's stages to addiction. See, the stages to addiction are initiation, where the addiction is primarily a coping skill or a survival mechanism. The addiction is important to us then. All right, it helps us cope and survive. However, there's a time where we start to establish the addiction in our life. It gets a little more ritualized. We might become a little more obsessive about it. We set up a pattern of its use or its relationship in our life. And then we start to escalate the thing, and we get an altered belief system about ourselves, out of control, shame, our need for the addiction. We get harmful consequences. It's becoming noticeable. And we're even starting to get scared in that escalation phase. It's increasing in our life, and our life is beginning to more revolve around it. So then, what do? We get in control, and we de-escalate the addiction. And addicts de-escalate all the time. I love it. My dad couldn't have been an alcoholic. He quit drinking. Well, who quits drinking? People that don't have a problem with alcohol usually don't need to even bother quitting drinking. And so it's like that's a de-escalation. And a lot of quitting drinking is de-escalation. A lot of people's recovery programs is only a de-escalation of the addiction and not recovery. In fact, I think the first few years of most people's recovery program is a de-escalation of the addiction and not recovery. It's where we're controlling the use. And I also believe that people can cut down, stop altogether, but they're still addicts. And as much in their addiction, they're just in a different stage. Now, at that stage of de-escalation, you've got some choices. Your choice is that you can continue to control that and have a white-knuckled sobriety, no matter what the addiction is, or you can pick another addiction. All right? And this is the stage where people oftentimes switch addictions. Anybody ever stop smoking in here? Okay, what did you do next? You start eating. That's the most common switch of addiction, see? So you're still not dealing with your system, your reality, your fears, your anxiety. What you're doing is you're just finding another addiction to take care of them. Now, sometimes then the switch of addiction works and we can escalate that, or other times we'll go back to the other addiction, the same addiction, we'll go back to escalating that. Now, if we stay in the escalation period long enough, we're going to get to two other phases, which the first one is acute and the second one is chronic. Acute is where our life is really revolving around the addiction. We are obsessed and somewhat possessed by the addiction itself, and we're starting to have major life problems. We might lose a job, a relationship might get hurt. That's acute. Chronic is where you've had your major life problems. You're possessed by the addiction. You live for the addiction. You have selective vision. And your major life problems are loss of family, health, friends, job, income, money. Now, traditionally, when we think of intervening with an addict, when do we think of intervening? At what stage? Chronic. We actually say, haven't you ever heard, well, they'll bottom out. Of course, they might be dead, but if they're not dead, we'll intervene. Now, when you've lost everything, health, job, money, friends, family, and self-respect, what the hell's a sense of recovery? That's a ridiculous time to intervene with someone, isn't it? They don't have any motivation for recovery. I believe there's got to be another place to intervene. The tricky thing is, though, I jump to the extreme. I go all the way back and I say, let's go to the initiation of addiction. Let's intervene there. And what is the initiation of addiction? The initiation of addiction, as far as I'm concerned, comes from childhood. And it comes from issues in childhood, primarily four issues: abuse, neglect, abandonment, and enmeshment. Addictions are about feelings. We have these feelings that we don't know what to do with, that are stuffed, that we have to act out. With feelings, you either talk them out, work them out, or act them out. And the acting out of the feelings that we haven't been able to talk out or work out is called addiction. All right, so what happens then is that we've got this abuse issue. All right, and there's always feelings. Kids have feelings about being abused. Some of us, have a hard time with that. But anyway, so this kid said, what does the kid do? Say, listen, you're abusing me. I'm really angry about this. And I don't like the shame that I'm getting. You should be ashamed yourself. I'm not supposed to feel this shame. And you're scaring me. And I don't want to be scared. I'm too little to be this scared of you. And it's sad. And you're really hurting me when you're abusing me. Is that what kids do? Abuse them more for doing it, wouldn't you? I mean, shut up, kid. You're blowing me away with this stuff. So what we do then is we stuff those feelings, right? But we can't keep feelings stuffed without acting them out somehow, without taking care of, without distracting ourselves from them. So what we do then is we get into our sex, we get into food, we get into fantasy, we get into, relationship stuff, we get into, TV. We learn somehow that we can distract ourselves and take care of those feelings, and we survive that way. See, my codependency was survival. Maybe alcohol. In fact, I hear it all the time. Alcoholics say, I'm glad for the program. If I hadn't discovered the program, I would have never found myself. And and that if I weren't an alcoholic, I wouldn't have, discovered myself or the program. See, the alcoholism, and maybe sometimes I've heard people say that the alcoholism saved their life. Without that period of alcoholism, they might have killed themselves, given what was going on with their feelings and the rest of their, circumstances. So, see, sometimes our addictions continue even as survival until we can find a different kind of recovery or a different kind of survival. So the addictions aren't necessarily bad, but especially in the establishment and the initiation phases, we need them. And we need them because we don't get to deal with it. Neglect. What's a kid do with who do you talk to about your feelings if you're being neglected? No one. You're set up to be an addict if you were neglected. If you're abandoned, it's the same thing. People are gone. You're not going to talk about your feelings. And enmeshment is a tough one, though, right? I mean, the other three are easy. What's this enmeshment stuff? Right. Enmeshment, if you look at that, we're all on this pathway to becoming us. So that's our job in life. That's what we came in for. We came in to become us. And we're on this path, and we're constantly becoming the person that we were meant to be. But very frequently, we get waylaid off of that path. We get thrown off the path, and we have to become something or someone else. Examples of enmeshment would be if you're thrown off the path by a father who says, listen, I wanted to be an athlete, and I didn't go as far as I could have, but you're going to go that far for me. And we're going to train you, and you're going to be an athlete. You're going to be an athlete for you? No, you're going to be an athlete for Dad. You don't even get to know if you wanted to be an athlete. Or, it's getting set up to be an extension of the parent and live the parent's life out for them, and they vicariously experience their life through you. Getting enmeshed in what they think you're supposed to be instead of what you're supposed to be, instead of what you allowing yourself to become. Getting enmeshed in the denial of the system. One thing about family systems is that there is no denial. Everything in the family gets acted out, especially the secrets get acted out in the family. So, I could tell you some real weird stories about the people getting enmeshed in the denial and the secrets. And I think it's true of addiction and alcoholism and behaviors and affairs and anger and depression. And so, in fact, I have not worked with an adolescent yet that attempted suicide. And, suicide is the second leading cause of death among adolescents. Did you know that? Leading cause is accidents, and some of those I think are pretty suicidal. I have not worked with a suicide attempt by an adolescent yet where someone else in that family system, like mom or dad or both, did not have a very obvious death wish. Very obvious to me, but covert in the family system. I think that when a parent has a death wish and doesn't deal with that, sets a kid up to attempt suicide or carry that death wish. I'll give you another example of that one. When I was growing up, I was a shoplifter. Now, I was also, like a good kid in the community. I took care of people. I got good grades, and I was an athlete. But I was shoplifting from 6th grade to 11th grade. My older brother was the thief of Baghdad. He was 6 years old and breaking into houses. Okay, and he got busted later for stealing, and it was serious. My younger brother, he once stole an 8-foot slate-top pool table out of an open bowling alley. Now, and he was alone. That was, when asked why he did it, he says, "I couldn't figure out how to steal a bowling alley." Right? No, he got caught 10 miles away with it laid over my dad's car, convertible, and the police couldn't figure out what this kid was doing, driving around with a pool table laid over the convertible. So they asked about it. Now that's major theft, right? Well, my sister was, the spiritual one in the family. She went to the convent. She was a nun. She got busted for shoplifting at Disneyland. I know it's okay if you don't get in the habit, right? But I mean, this is, sorry. But see, now that's kind of weird. That wasn't her. That wasn't our value. What went on in our family? Well, something that we didn't know. My dad was a shoplifter. My dad even bragged about stealing a bicycle, riding a bicycle out of Sears. And I didn't know that. And we didn't know that. We were acting it out, though. All of us acted out that secret. Every one of us. Now, how does that happen? Well, I'm not even sure. It has to do with the feelings, the values, the systems, the covert messages, the what you catch out of the corner of your eye. And now I can even remember that I think, like I'd see my dad in a drugstore, I'd see him pick up a cigar and light it. Of course, that isn't stealing, right? I mean, that's vandalism. That's burning property in the... Anyway, you catch it, you pick it up, you feel it, and you act it out. I have an even more bizarre... I worked with a guy who was exposing himself on Hennepin Avenue in Minneapolis. Summertime, obviously. And anyway, he about 3 months into his therapy, we had his brother come in. His brother said that, he had exposed himself on Hennepin Avenue too. A few months later, we had the family in, and Dad admitted that he had been exposing himself on Hennepin Avenue for years. No one knew they hadn't exposed themselves to each other, right? But they didn't know, that, I don't like sex addict jokes, but, sometimes that's impossible. You don't know what it is that you're acting out, or what you're becoming, or why you're addicted, why you have this compulsion to do something, and so often, it's not about us. It's about something being denied in the system. We get into a reenactment of the system. And that can be with relationships, affairs, behaviors, any one of a number of things. So, the initiation and the enmeshment. Enmeshment comes out of the denial, the expectations, the feelings that aren't being dealt with. We get enmeshed in other people's reality. We're set up to take care of them, to take their feelings on. And in that enmeshment, we don't get to deal with our own reality, and that's also the setup for addiction. I'm going to give you... Any questions about addiction? I'm done with addiction for now. Anything else? Any questions about addiction? Stages, cycles? Yes?
Are you basically saying that it's all system theory, which you referred to several times, in substitution?
Yeah, basically, I believe that one of the primary contributing factors to addiction is that it's a system that we come in. Now, I don't think it's all reenactment or acting out of the secrets, but I think it's all about feelings and how we've learned to deal with the feelings. I also believe that there's biochemical basis for addiction and the addictions that we choose. I think that addictions become exacerbated by our particular personality types and genetic makeup and biochemical balance. But the key is still that if we know how to deal with our feelings, and if we don't have a basis of feelings that we have to act out on, we're much less likely to be addictive. No matter what I can never say what addiction a person will get into. Although I think a lot of our addictions are modeled learned behaviors, and that if you look at an addiction, you'll see that the same addiction right down through the family system, for generations. And some people will say that's genetic or biochemical. I maintain that it's more still about systems. That systems are the primary setup for addiction. Yes. Pardon? Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, I'll be talking about the family system. But what we see, and I have been talking like in the system, if there's something going on in the system that's denied, see, nothing gets lost in a system because it's a system, so it gets acted out somewhere else. That's one example of the family systems theory. And in terms of the covert rules of the system, the enmeshment that happens in the system, all of this affects our ability to not just recover from addiction, but to have serenity and peace. Or whether we're going to reenact and switch addictions and still not be able to deal with the bottom line stuff. Generally, I believe the bottom line are our feelings and the system that we grew up in and how it's impacting us and how we're reenacting aspects of that system. And that will affect whether or not our recovery from addiction is going to be successful and that we get the real serenity from it. I think people can control. Yes?
addiction and a behavior that's been learned through the system?
That if you're told to stop doing that, you stop doing it. It's a behavior. And the difference between the behavior and the addiction, and if you decide or you're told that that's nuts behavior and you're going to stop it and it's addiction, you won't be able to stop it. You'll have the compulsion, the urge, you'll find yourself slipping, or you'll find yourself trying to control it and obsessing it. Then it's addictive. We need support.
If it's a learned behavior, though, it may be habitual.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you stop it, sometimes you could slip back into it other times, but it wouldn't have that compulsiveness.
Oh, well, a lot of our learned behaviors, when they become habitual, become addictive. And that you know what I mean? It's like the habit itself becomes an addiction. It's like, I think people generally smoke. Well, they smoke, you smoke to relieve tension. But for some of it just is a habit also. So when you quit smoking, you've got dual tension. See, smoking is primarily about fear. In fact, if you look at where you feel fear, where do you feel fear in your body, usually? Where does it center? Chest, some upper stomach, butterflies. Throat is the first place. Constriction of the throat. Anybody ever get a dry mouth from fear? Breathing, shallow, or catching your breath. Sorry about that. Sweaty palms. Kind of nervous. Fear starts to twitter out the hands and, sometimes the feet. Okay, so we've invented things in our society to take care of feelings. And the thing that we invented in our society to take care of fear is cigarettes. And we didn't invent it, but the fact is that you put a cigarette in that sweaty hand that's nervous, and you got, already something to do with that. Put it in your mouth and open your mouth up, and then it opens the throat up, and it fills the chest. And it blocks the feeling of fear. And also, if fear gives you a headache or tension in your head, it immediately gives you a nicotine effect in your head. All right, so now we can take care of our fear. In fact, if people stop smoking, that start again, what usually coincides with their beginning again is a fearful situation. Like more stress, more fear in their life about a relationship, or a near traffic accident. In fact, after a traffic accident, people that have never smoked, they say, give me a cigarette, give me a cigarette. A lot of times people, the old movies, remember after sex, what always happened in the old movies? Huh? They lit a cigarette, right? Reminds me of a horrible, well, okay. Guy went to the doctor with some problems. The doctor says, do you smoke after intercourse? And the guy says, I don't know, I never looked. But anyway, but isn't that awful? We'll probably edit that some way. But anyway, so you're smoking the cigarette. See, what is that cigarette about after sex? The cigarette after sex is about fear of intimacy. What the hell do we do after sex? How do we be close? And that's hard for a lot of us. So we have these fears, and then we smoke away our fears, and we don't have them anymore. And then we stop smoking. And we get anxious. We get tense. We're getting tense because we're finally having to face the fears. We're also getting tense because we're giving up a habit. That is, the habit and addiction become one. The habit of hanging around bars and drinking with people. That's a habit too, as well as an addiction. So the two aren't differentiated anymore. And recovery then is recovery from the habit of the behavior, as well as from the compulsion and the addictiveness and what it takes care of. So, you can't just recover from one without dealing with the other. And addictions are recursive. That's a part of addictiveness, is that there's a recursiveness, a repetitiveness about the addiction in our life. And it's not an addiction unless it's repetitive. Okay, any other questions about addiction? All right, we're going to go on to, yes, Rick.
Basically, if I'm getting what I'm getting so far is that the recovery is predicated on learning how to deal with the feelings.
Absolutely. And also, learning how to deal with the feelings often involves understanding the system that the repressed, especially the repressed feelings came from, and the system that taught us not to deal with feelings. Okay? And that'll become clearer as I talk about feelings.
Can this coexist? Sure. Can that coexist with the old AA line about change our actions and feelings and thoughts will change as we change our actions?
Well, the question is, can it exist with the idea that if we change our actions, our thoughts and feelings will follow the change of actions? And yes, I believe that the only one thing that we can change is our behavior. And that's the first thing I ask people to change. I say, stop acting out what you're acting out while we look at what you're feeling and the system. Okay? But I think if you only change the behavior and you never deal with any of the system that you've come from and you learn and survive that behavior, you're probably going to set yourself up to get back into some more crummy behavior. And if we don't learn, I mean, alcoholism clearly is called a feeling disease. It's a disease of the emotions. You get big, huge mood swings, and they're sometimes great and sometimes the pits, but we get addicted to the mood swing, not to the alcohol. And the mood swing, a mood is a feeling. So it's a feeling swing that we become addicted to. And that's what the disease is. So to think that we can treat the disease without dealing with feelings doesn't work. Jake.
Is that what you meant by intervention? To go back to the childhood or relive? Is that recovery hinges on being able to relive the...
Yeah, the question is, does recovery hinge on being able to relive and go back to the childhood experience? And I think for some of us, real recovery does hinge on looking at that, yes. I think for a lot of us, real recovery does hinge on that. Because a lot of us, maybe we'll quit the addiction, but we'll still be reenacting the experience, or we'll still be white-knuckling our sobriety. And I think that we can get more sobriety, more serenity, when we do learn what it is that set us up to not deal with our feelings, what the feelings that we've repressed inside are about, and learn how to share those feelings and break some of those rules. The key is, until it becomes explicit, it doesn't change. Okay? This is a key concept of all of our work, I think, is nothing changes till it becomes real. Scott Peck, in the book The Road Less Traveled, he said it when he said the only path away from our suffering is to embrace our suffering. We all have feelings. We've all always had feelings. Some of us have cut ourselves off from our feelings. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next segment.